speaking of gotta go, possibly staying, let's talk about Alex Highsmith's contract. You wrote about it. What's this, a week ago now? A couple days ago now?
Yeah, earlier this week.
Yeah, it was earlier this week. It was like Monday or Tuesday that article dropped. You broke down the contract. I believe it was what the floor was $15 million a year. The ceiling was 22, somewhere around there. Is that what you truly think? And do you think that makes sense for both sides?
Yeah, I mean, I was just kind of curious. I wanted to do research for my own knowledge too, but like I kept seeing people ask me on Twitter about what I thought about Highsmith. Like, is he gonna be here for the long term or not? And like I wanted to kind of do a deep dive just for myself more than anything, because to get a better perspective of it. But just kind of combing through the numbers and like looking where certain guys were getting paid. It really feels like that 15 million mark is kind of the bare minimum kind of baseline of what we should be expecting. That's on the lighter side of things, obviously too. So, but I really do look at the ceiling of it as well, like I kind of said in the article. But you look at what Bradley Chubb got from Miami. I think that is an expensive contract. And
Huge,
if
contract.
I'm Highsmith's agent, and and I never doubt players for going after their money, taking care of themselves. I never doubt that. I don't have any issue with you maximizing your earnings. But if it was me and Highsmith's main goal was to make every single dollar count while he can during this his professional span here, I'm looking at that Bradley Chubb contract like, dude, I'm better than this dude right now. So
yeah,
why can't I get that? I think if I was an agent and my main goal was to make as much money as possible, that would be the starting point for me, and then I'd probably work my way down. But yeah, Chubb's contract, you just look at what he got. It's like 5 years, 100 and something mil,
dude,
over 100 mil.
Like, it was like 100 mil.
So that's you look at the numbers, man. It's hard to deny that Highsmith is at least that same caliber player. The numbers, the numbers don't lie. He's been more productive, especially over the past two seasons, and available.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part of it too. Like when you're signing guys to these lucrative deals, second contracts where you're paying guys, within the top 10, top 20 of their position, you got to really be convinced that guys are going to be available for you, because when they're not, it's a sinking anchor to your team. When you got all that cap space that's on injured reserve, and Highsmith, he's been a guy that's been consistently available.
Yeah, I think it's crazy because you highlight this in the article, but you don't hit on these guys late in the draft. You just don't, not on outside linebackers. They're just because you have to be a physical freak, and Alex Highsmith isn't really like a physical freak. He just is like, he's just good. He's a unicorn in the situation. He's a bit of a unicorn. And that's why Bradley Chubb got paid so much, because what was he, like the 5th pick in the draft or something like that? He was crazy high, and he'll stay high because of that number. Do you think if Alex Highsmith went and hit the free agency market, is he making 22 million a year?
It's hard for me to say no, because I mean, you don't know what because all it takes is one, right? This is like what people say when people ask me about like draft prospects. Or like, do you think this person could go here? And I'm like, I don't personally value that player there. But again, like, all it takes is one team, so you can't really say that. If 31 teams value him as a 15 to 17 million a year guy, but one team really feels like, that's a need. They like him as a person, an individual. They think he's got high character. He's a perfect scheme fit. And they decide to go up to that 2021 number. That's all it takes is one team. So,
yeah,
but yeah, like what you were saying, I mean, Brandon Thorne is a guy that I think is an incredible resource when it comes to, offensive line, defensive line play. And he, created this signature stat called True Sack Score. Highsmith finished 3rd in the entire NFL this past season. He was only behind, I think it was Myles Garrett and Hassan Reddick. And then you look at the guys that are directly behind him. It's Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, those defensive player of the year candidates.
Literally defensive player of the year.
Yeah. But those 4 guys, all first round picks. So that's what, to me, makes the Highsmith situation so interesting, because they found him outside the top 100 picks. And edge rusher is just a premier position that relies heavily on athleticism. And Highsmith's a really good athlete, and he's, a pretty refined pass rusher, especially at this point in his career. But you just don't see teams like this. Is not receiver or running back where you routinely see teams find impact players at this position that are in these spots to get paid. You normally don't find those guys late on day 2, early day 3. I mean, there's always, you'll see your Danielle Hunters, but like for every one Danielle Hunter, you'll have 10 first-round picks that pan out. It's just
what did Hunter
how the position go.
What did Hunter get? He got paid like what, a year ago, 2 years ago? He got paid good money.
Yeah, I mean, he got paid a little bit. He got paid a little bit. I want to say it was multiple years ago, but he's probably
it was a while ago. It's 2018.
He's one of
when he got paid.
Yeah, I mean, there's always gonna be outliers and stuff, but like Hunter, he was one of those guys that didn't have any he had basically no college production to his name, and that's another thing.
5 years, $72 million, which at the time in 2018, that's a huge number. Yeah, that's 50. It's $14 million a year. Like today, that's
the
$20
contract's
million.
a deal. I think he might be on the move to it. It sounds like, I don't know what Minnesota's got a crossroads on what they're going to have to do.
Flores went into a weird situation there. What's your thoughts on that Flores situation? You think that was the best move? I thought Denver was the best move, but I could see if somebody was telling him like, "Hey, look you're gonna push the limit, and you might not get it. You might not end up anywhere if you wait too long."
I don't know, that Minnesota defense is tricky for me because I feel like they've got some guys that I really think are underappreciated. I've always been a fan of Hunter's game, but he has to be available. And then they've got some guys that have been there a while that have been extremely productive and fun to watch too, like Eric Kendricks and, Harrison Smith. But man, that secondary was awful last year. I mean, they were dead last in man coverage percentage because they just didn't have any corners. The guys that they drafted this past year, which I love their haul. They ended up getting Lewis Seen and Andrew Booth. These were two of my favorite prospects in last year's class. But Seen, I think broke his leg before the season even started. And then Booth was never really healthy and could never really get on the train. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. Because Flores, his scheme itself, you look at his time in Miami, very blitz heavy, a lot of exotic fronts, a lot of different guys coming off blitzes. But a lot of man coverage, and if you want to play that much man coverage, you got to have the dudes to do it. And they don't.
Patrick Peterson is not the guy.
They don't have it right now, so they're a team to me that definitely is going to be in the market for a cornerback extremely early in the draft, and that's even assuming that Booth comes back and he's the guy that they probably think he's going to be, and Seen comes back, he's healthy and gets rolling, so. They're at a little bit of a crossroads. To me, Minnesota was, we talked about this, I think, on the channel too, but Minnesota was a team that definitely overachieved last year with everything considered. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a good move for Flores. I mean, anytime you get those DC jobs, I mean, he's a guy that already has head coaching experience. So, I mean, if he is able to turn this Vikings defense around, I mean, he'll be right back in the head coach.
Oh, he'll be
next season.
That's what my thought was. If you go to Denver, if you did land that defensive coordinator job, Denver's defense is good enough that I could probably go coach it, and it'll be all right. You end up to Denver next year, you are the hottest name on the coaching market. Arizona, I think it was I was very thankful he didn't go to Arizona. Thought that was a terrible option. I think whoever ends up in Arizona is in trouble. And Minnesota was, I mean, it's a good backup plan. Either way, I'm happy for him. I
think the only thing for me is having watched so much Denver stuff last year, it just seems schematically like it would have been drastically different than what Flores likes to do. And that's the only thing that kind of scares me a little bit. But the talent itself, I mean, when you got guys like Justice Simmons and Patrick Surtain, those guys can pretty much do anything.
Sleepers too. You got second year Nick Benito coming off the edge, you got
there's definitely a lot of talent over there. So I mean, he'd have made it work. So, and the best coaches are always adaptable to their personnel. And I think Flores, even though he does have a brand of what he likes to do over there, I'm sure he'd have done the same thing. But one more thing too, with the Alex Highsmith thing, the reason why I want to get that out there was just to kind of give everybody a broad range of what he's probably gonna want in terms of contract wise, but also I think it's a really good talking point for what the Steelers are potentially going to have to do in the draft. Cause You look at when Bud Dupree was entering his 5th-year option, that's when they took Alex Highsmith.
Yep.
Which was good because it gave them, a legitimate third edge, and they had this guy waiting in the wings. I think it's a conversation starter that you have to be aware of. The Steelers are going to have to make a decision now, really. Do we see this guy as part of our long-term future? Are we, and I talk about this in the article, but like, are we going to be content paying $45 million plus for our edge rushers on a yearly basis, on a year-by-year basis? That's a question that you have to ask. That's a lot of money allocated to one position. Granted, it's the most important position for the Steelers defense. But if you're not, like, if they're dead set on it, like, we like Highsmith as a player, but we don't either A, feel like we're comfortable paying him like 17, 18 million, which is what I think he's probably going to end up coming in at, or B, we think he's worth that, but we just don't feel comfortable paying 45 million for both our edge rushers, given we just gave TJ Watt a crazy contract. I think you got to have a legitimate conversation. Like, how high are you going to take an edge? Because rookie pass rushers in general, they like edge rusher isn't typically a position where guys just come in, even like first round picks. Like, you see first round picks come in, they struggle rushing the passer year one just because the jump is so drastically different. College offensive tackles, as someone who watches a lot of college film, like, a lot of college offensive tackles are really bad. That's just, you can win off of like physical traits a lot easier in college than you can in the NFL. And like guys like Trayvon Walker, you kind of look at his production this past season. He was, the number 1 overall pick, and he was basically a non-factor at all season up until they played the Titans later in the year, and the Titans weren't playing real people on the offensive line this year. So to me, I think like if Highsmith's not going to be a guy that they're going to be able to work out an extension with, then you probably need to take a guy on day 2 of the draft because, to get them developed and ready to go as the starter the year after. So
I still think I think I'm going to stand with this for a while now. I think the Steelers are in the running for an edge rusher in the first 3 to 4 picks either way, because you can't, we've hit a point where losing TJ Watt is detrimental to the team and could ruin a whole season. And it's been 2 seasons in a row now where you start to worry about whether or not, he could stay healthy for a whole season. So you have to have a backup plan. And on top of that, they utilize 3 edge rushers as much as they could anyways. They just can't seem to find a third edge rusher. I think this is going to be the year where they're just like, either way, we want a new guy. I think that they'll look at it and go, how high can we get a new guy? Because if they get a stud in those first couple of picks, somebody that they didn't imagine they'd get in those first couple of picks, maybe that changes their outlook on the Alex Highsmith. But at the same time, maybe it just looks at it and goes, why not just have 3 great edge rushers, depending on how much they value that, which in Pittsburgh they do. Here's the question. Do you think it's possible you have TJ's contract, you have Cam's contract, you have Minka's contract, to take on an Alex Highsmith contract, re-sign Cam Sutton, re-sign Terrell Edmonds? I don't think you have to pay an inside linebacker. I think Myles Jack is the guy. It doesn't make any sense to get rid of Myles Jack and try to find somebody for what you're going to save, because that's just not going to happen. And bring back Larry O, which we'll get into Larry O's contract here in a second. But do you think it's possible to pull this off?
Yeah, I mean, that's just part of that's part of the decision making here is, who are you going to prioritize, bring it back? I think Cam Sutton's going to be a priority. I don't think Edmonds is going to break the bank either way. I'd like to see him return, but I don't think he's going to get like a massive pay bump, whether it be in Pittsburgh or on the open market. I mean, we'll see. Yeah. He had a solid season, but I just don't feel like he's a guy that's going to break the bank either way. We'll see what they do at inside linebacker. I think that's definitely a confusing part for me. I'm conflicted there because I don't particularly love the cap hit for Myles Jack, and I'm not really sure that they're going to get that money's worth if they bring him back. But I don't know that there's a better option either. Spillane's a free agent. I think he'll be brought back on the low. We know Devin's gone. They'll probably add somebody either in free agency or the draft. But I like the free agency group of inside linebackers. I'm putting together a piece right now about that. There's a lot of good options right now, depending on who gets signed back by their teams before the period actually starts. But
no, that's a good one. What are some names that are out? I know who's out there. Who's the big guy?
Tremaine Edmonds.
No, not Tremaine Edmonds.
That's the one everybody's.
Yeah, Tremaine Edmonds is the guy everybody wants, obviously, but there's like a realistic option Is David Long? Is that who it is?
David Long, he's a guy that I really like. Pretty sure David Long had a pre-draft visit with the Steelers too. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of guys. Kazir White, TJ Edwards, a solid player. Al-Shaair for the Niners. We talked about him at length on the podcast on Wednesday. He's a guy that I love. He's San Francisco's third linebacker, but he's only third by default because they got two of the best linebackers in the league.
Ridiculous linebackers. Yeah.
But yeah, he's a guy that I really love. So it's a good little group. What's his name? Quincy Williams for the Jets. He's another guy that I really enjoy watching. So there's a lot of names out there. It just kind of depends on, if they're going to make that switch or if they're content with Miles Jack just running it back and finishing out his contract.
They got to figure out. I think you could extend Jack and there's an option there, but you have to see what the market is, because if you get rid of Jack, what are you saving? Like $7 million or something, or $6 million? Are you going to go get a good inside linebacker for $6 million? That's, it's a tough question, and be able to, it's a tough question to answer.